When doors don't open and opportunities seem to vanish one by one, it's natural for the human heart to grow weary and start questioning whether God has forgotten or overlooked its prayers. Yet in the silence of unanswered prayers there is a divine whisper, a quiet message that says, I am not denying you, I am directing you. For every closed door is not rejection but redirection, a divine rearrangement of your path, so that you will not settle for something smaller than what heaven has prepared. Because often what we think is best for us is far beneath the greatness that God intends. And if He allowed us to have what we asked for too soon, it might destroy us before it develops us. So He withholds certain things not to punish us, but to protect us from premature blessings that could crush rather than crown us. For God's timing is never late, but always layered with purpose. And while we look at the surface of events, He looks at the structure of eternity, arranging every step, every delay, every moment of waiting as part of a greater orchestration that our human minds can hardly comprehend. You may be praying for one opportunity while heaven is preparing 10 more that are far beyond your imagination. And that's why the waiting feels long, because the preparation behind your next chapter is greater than what you can see now, like a seed hidden beneath the soil that seems forgotten, but is actually being transformed in darkness, gaining strength to break through at the right moment. So too are you being shaped, stretched, and refined by every closed door you face, because God is working behind the scenes to build endurance, faith, and character within you. For what He is bringing requires a stronger version of you, not the anxious one that cries over rejections, but the faithful one who learns to trust the unseen hand of God moving even when nothing seems to move. When Joseph was thrown into prison, it appeared as though every dream had died, but that delay was divine direction, for it positioned him at the exact place where his gift would be recognized by Pharaoh. And when that moment came, he didn't just get a job, he stepped into destiny. So when you feel confined by circumstances that look like a dead end, know that God might be preparing you for the palace through what feels like a prison. And the people who turned away from you, the interviews that never called back, the opportunities that slipped through your fingers, all of them were instruments of divine protection, keeping you away from something too small for your calling. Sometimes God allows failure not to hurt you, but to reroute you. Because if every door opened easily, you would never discover the strength of your faith or the depth of your dependence on Him. And if everything happened on your schedule, you would never learn the rhythm of divine timing. So He pauses your plans to perfect your purpose. And though it feels painful, it is purposeful, because your delay is building spiritual maturity, teaching you to listen to His voice above the noise of your worries. For when you finally reach the destination He designed, you will look back and thank Him for every no, every not yet, and every season of waiting that taught you to trust His plan. So stop interpreting delay as abandonment and start seeing it as direction, because every disappointment is divine movement, every rejection is heavenly redirection, and every moment of stillness is the quiet space where God aligns your steps with His will. And when the time is right, the doors that once seemed impossible will open effortlessly, not through your striving but through His strategy. For His ways are higher, His thoughts deeper, and His plan for you is not simply to give you what you want, but to shape you into who you were meant to become. And when that happens, you will understand that the waiting was never wasted. It was the workshop of your destiny where divine direction was being written in silence and patience. Many people wake up every morning carrying the same weight, the same worry, wondering how they will make it through another day, and their entire life becomes a cycle of survival, a pattern of working just to exist. But deep within every soul there is a whisper from God that says you were made for more than this. You were not created merely to survive. You were created to fulfill divine purpose, because survival feeds the body, but purpose nourishes the spirit. And until you discover that purpose, even the best job will feel empty. For true fulfillment does not come from a paycheck, but from alignment with heaven's assignment. And that is why God sometimes allows the instability of human plans, so that your heart will search for eternal direction. Because He knows that if you found comfort in the wrong thing, you would never reach for the right thing. Every man and woman born into this world carries a piece of God's vision inside of them, a divine deposit of potential waiting to be activated. Yet the tragedy of life is not death, but living without discovering why you were born. So many people measure their worth by their occupation rather than their purpose. They ask, what job do I have, instead of what calling am I fulfilling? And that mindset keeps them bound to the ordinary, chasing stability while ignoring destiny. But when you understand that your existence carries divine intention, you stop chasing after approval and start walking in assignment, because your purpose is not something you find in the world. It is something you awaken through your relationship with God. And when you step into that awareness, everything begins to shift. Your prayers change, your mindset changes, and your life begins to operate under the rhythm of divine direction. A job may give you security for a season, but purpose gives you significance for a lifetime. And that is why God often shakes the foundation of what we think we need, removing certain opportunities to push us toward what He knows we are capable of. Because He did not design you to live beneath your divine potential. He designed you to reflect His glory through your unique assignment. And even when you feel unqualified, even when fear whispers that you are not enough, God's purpose remains greater than your limitations. For He equips those He calls, and He does not look for the most skilled. He looks for the most surrendered, because purpose is not about ability, it is about availability. And when you say yes to Him, He turns your weakness into witness and your uncertainty into testimony. When you stop living only to pay bills and start living to fulfill purpose, life takes on a new meaning. You begin to see divine opportunity in ordinary moments. You recognize that the work of your hands is a platform for ministry, that your conversations are vessels of influence, that every encounter is part of a bigger story, and even your struggles become preparation for your assignment. Because purpose is not always glamorous, it is often hidden in the mundane, yet it carries eternal weight. And once you realize that, you begin to thank God not only for the doors that opened, but also for the ones that closed. Because every closed door redirected you to your divine lane. Many are trapped in jobs that sustain them physically, but starve them spiritually. And they feel restless because the soul cannot find peace outside of purpose. That restlessness you feel is not frustration, but invitation. It is God calling you to something deeper, something greater, a life where you are not defined by what you do, but by who you are becoming. For you were not made to fit into the mold of this world. You were made to manifest the kingdom of God in the place where He has planted you. And that can only happen when you stop defining success by the standards of man and start defining it by obedience to the will of God. You are not here by accident. You are not breathing just to exist. You are breathing because there is still purpose inside of you waiting to be birthed. And when you finally embrace that truth, the fear of lack loses its power. the anxiety of uncertainty disappears, and the desire for worldly validation fades away. For you will understand that your value does not come from your position, but from your purpose. And once you walk in that revelation, you will no longer chase opportunities. Opportunities will begin to chase you. Because heaven always supports the one who walks in divine purpose. Inside every human being, there lies a seed, a divine deposit placed by the Creator before the foundations of the world, a seed that carries potential, purpose, and the blueprint of destiny. Yet many overlook it because it appears small, ordinary, or insignificant. They look at their limitations, their background, their failures, and they convince themselves that they have nothing valuable to offer. But God never creates without intention. He never forms without function. And that hidden gift within you is the very tool through which He plans to reveal His glory. So instead of searching endlessly for an opportunity outside, God calls you to look inward, to discover the treasure He has already placed within. Because your gift is not just talent, it is divine strategy, a spiritual key designed to unlock doors that no one else can open. And when you learn to nurture it, protect it, and offer it back to God, it multiplies beyond what you could ever imagine. David was never invited to the battlefield as a warrior. He was left with sheep, ignored by his family, and yet his gift, the skill of a shepherd, the accuracy of a sling, the confidence born from solitude, became the instrument of his elevation. He didn't chase a position. He expressed his gift, and the gift opened the door. Because when the right moment arrives, what God has placed in you will announce you before kings. So don't despise the small beginnings. Don't curse the hidden season, for God uses obscurity to develop authenticity. And the same thing you call ordinary might be extraordinary in His hands. Your gift is not small because it doesn't shine yet. It is growing roots before it grows fruit. And once it is surrendered to God, it carries supernatural power to shift your life and impact generations. Joseph didn't have a title. He didn't hold a position. Yet his gift of interpreting dreams became the vehicle of his promotion. What was once mocked became the very thing that brought him before Pharaoh. And that is how divine design works. What people overlook, heaven values. What others reject, God selects. Because He doesn't measure your worth by worldly standards, but by eternal purpose. So instead of crying over doors that didn't open, start developing what He has already placed in your hands. Sharpen your skills, polish your vision, refine your gift. Because your next level is not waiting for new circumstances. It's waiting for a more faithful version of you who is ready to activate what has been sleeping inside. Too many people bury their gifts beneath fear and comparison. They measure their progress by others and forget that purpose is not a race but a revelation. God gave you something unique so you wouldn't have to copy anyone. Your voice, your creativity, your compassion, your wisdom, your endurance. These are not random qualities. They are divine ingredients assigned to your purpose. And when you start using them faithfully, heaven breathes favor upon your efforts, multiplying little into much, turning small acts of obedience into great testimonies of breakthrough. Because God doesn't bless potential, He blesses movement. And when you move in faith, your gift begins to speak louder than your credentials. The world may not see your value yet, but heaven has already written your name on the blueprint of destiny. Your gift is not waiting for permission from people. It is waiting for your submission to God. And once you surrender it fully, He will turn it into a channel of provision, impact, and influence. You don't need to chase applause or recognition. Just focus on perfecting what God has placed in you. Because the same gift that sustains you will also elevate you. And when that moment of divine unveiling arrives, you will realize that the seasons of silence were not wasted. They were seasons of shaping, pruning, and preparation for manifestation. So lift your eyes from what you lack and start seeing what you already have. Because the oil flows not where there is emptiness, but where there is obedience. And if you will simply present your gift to God, no matter how small it feels, He will use it to open doors that no man can close, to feed multitudes with what looks like not enough, to transform your pain into purpose, and your ability into anointed assignment, for your gift is the seed of your future, and when it is planted in faith, watered with patience, and surrendered in trust, it will bloom into something that reflects the greatness of the one who placed it in you. The world teaches us to measure our worth by numbers, by the salary we earn, the title we hold, the possessions we accumulate. Yet heaven operates by an entirely different system, a divine economy where value is determined not by how much we make, but by how much we obey. And when you begin to see life through that lens, you realize that God's plan is far bigger than a paycheck, because He did not design you merely to collect income, but to carry influence. He did not breathe His Spirit into you so that you could only work for survival. He placed His Spirit in you so that you could become an agent of transformation, someone who changes the atmosphere wherever you go. And when you begin to align yourself with that revelation, your heart shifts from asking, "How can I earn more?" to asking, "How can I serve more?" Because divine purpose is never about accumulation. It is about contribution. And the moment you start living for something beyond yourself, you begin to walk in the rhythm of destiny. God's plan for your life stretches beyond the borders of employment. He may be calling you to build something that has never existed before, to pioneer a movement, to launch a business that blesses others, to establish a foundation that heals hearts, to create art that speaks life, to mentor the lost, to lead in faith. Because His desire is not to keep you confined within the walls of limitation, but to release you into the vastness of your divine assignment. And the reason He sometimes withholds certain opportunities is because He is trying to awaken the visionary inside you, the creator that was made in His image, the builder who carries His nature. For He is not simply the God of provision, He is the God of multiplication. And when you surrender your plans to Him, He multiplies your impact far beyond what a job could ever provide. Many people are trapped in a system that tells them success equals stability, but in the kingdom of God, success equals obedience. And obedience sometimes leads you away from comfort zones into places of uncertainty where your faith must rise. Because God's bigger plan is not always logical, it is spiritual. He may call you to leave what looks secure in order to enter what seems impossible. But inside that impossible path lies the fulfillment of everything He promised. And when you take that step of faith, you discover that provision follows purpose, that resources chase obedience, that favor flows toward surrender. Because when you walk in the will of God, heaven itself becomes your employer. And you no longer depend on the systems of men. You depend on the supernatural economy of grace. A paycheck may fill your bank account for a month, but purpose fills your spirit for a lifetime. And that is why God is more concerned about shaping your destiny than satisfying your comfort. Because if He gave you everything you asked for, you might never discover everything He created you for. So sometimes He allows dissatisfaction to stir within your heart, not as a punishment, but as a signal that there is more, that there is something greater waiting beyond the horizon of your current understanding. And when that restlessness grows too strong to ignore, It is often heaven's way of saying, step out, trust me. Let me show you the life I designed before you were even born. When you finally understand that God's plan is not limited to employment, but expands into eternal impact, you begin to walk differently. You stop competing and start creating. You stop envying others and start empowering them. You stop worrying about provision because you recognize that provision flows through purpose, and every act of obedience becomes an investment in eternity, because your assignment is not just to earn, it is to serve, to love, to lead, to shine, to reveal the nature of God through whatever He has placed in your hands. And when you live that way, the peace that comes from alignment replaces the anxiety that comes from ambition. So lift your eyes above the paycheck and fix them on the promise. For God's dream for you is bigger than your job description. He wants to make you a vessel of abundance, not so you can boast in success, but so you can become a channel of blessing, carrying His goodness into families, communities, and nations. And when you surrender to that higher plan, you will discover that what you once chased begins to chase you, that what you once feared becomes your testimony, and that every step of obedience was leading you not to a job, but to a purpose that will outlive you. Because God's plan for you has never been about a paycheck. It has always been about your part in His eternal story. Before God promotes a person, He prepares them, and that preparation season often looks nothing like the promise. It feels lonely, uncertain, and sometimes even painful. Yet it is the very place where greatness is born. Because God never places heavy assignments on untested shoulders. He molds, shapes, and refines those He intends to elevate. And that process is what most people mistake for delay or denial, but in truth it is divine development. For promotion in the kingdom is never about position, it is about preparation. And every person God has ever used powerfully has first gone through a season of private training, where the unseen battles prepare them for public victory, where character is forged in silence and faith is strengthened in the dark. Because God values preparation more than presentation, Joseph spent years in prison before standing before Pharaoh, not because God forgot him, but because the palace required a version of Joseph that the pit could not produce. Those years of waiting refined his patience, deepened his humility, and built his wisdom, so that when the moment came, he was not only ready to interpret dreams, but to manage destiny. And that is what God does with you in the waiting. He transforms you from who you are into who you must become, because what you are praying for requires maturity, responsibility, and spiritual strength to sustain it. And God will never give you something that your character cannot handle. So when you feel like you are hidden, know that heaven is working on your foundation, strengthening the unseen parts of you, so that your future will not collapse under pressure. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before leading the Israelites, and in that wilderness he learned the rhythm of dependence, the patience of leadership, and the value of silence. Because before you can guide others, you must first learn to be guided. Before you can command authority, you must learn submission. And God uses the desert to teach you these sacred lessons, stripping away pride, ambition, and self-reliance until all that remains is obedience. For the wilderness is not punishment, it is purification. It is the space between calling and commissioning. And though it feels like nothing is happening, everything necessary for your next season is being prepared in that stillness. Even Jesus, the Son of God, worked as a carpenter before his ministry began, shaping wood while God shaped his purpose, learning the discipline of diligence, the humility of work, the patience of process, because divine destiny is never rushed, it unfolds in time, and every small task done with faithfulness becomes a rehearsal for greater things. So never despise the small assignments or the quiet seasons, because those are the classrooms of destiny where God equips you for impact. And the same hands that once built tables would later break bread for multitudes, proving that no season is wasted when it is surrendered to God. Preparation is not glamorous. It is often uncomfortable, filled with waiting, wondering, and walking by faith when you cannot see the outcome. But that is exactly where God matures you, teaching you to trust His word more than your circumstances. And when the appointed time comes, everything He promised begins to unfold effortlessly. Because you are ready, you are aligned, and you are equipped. And what once seemed like delay now makes perfect sense as divine orchestration, because God never wastes time, He redeems it, turning every tear, every trial, every silent night into a building block of destiny. So if you are in a season where doors remain closed, where prayers seem unanswered, where nothing appears to move, remember that heaven is still working. Your preparation is not punishment, but protection. Because if you entered the promise without the process, the blessing would crush you. But when God finishes His work in you, you will step into your purpose with strength, wisdom, and peace. And the doors that once resisted you will open without struggle, because preparation always precedes promotion. And when the divine moment arrives, you will realize that the waiting was never wasted. It was the sacred space where God prepared you for everything He promised. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the courage to keep walking when the road ahead is invisible. And trusting God's timing is one of the greatest acts of faith a person can ever demonstrate, because divine timing rarely aligns with human expectation, yet it is always perfect. And when you begin to understand this truth, you stop fighting against the seasons of life and start flowing with them, realizing that every delay, every detour, every moment of silence is carefully designed by God to position you exactly where you need to be. And though impatience whispers that you are behind, heaven assures that you are right on schedule. Because the author of time cannot be late, and everything He has promised carries an appointed moment of manifestation that cannot be rushed or delayed by human effort. Faith means walking when you have no proof, believing when you have no sign, and praising when you have no result. Because faith is not rooted in what you see, it is anchored in who God is. And when you build your confidence on His character rather than your calendar, peace begins to replace panic. For the one who created you knows the end before the beginning. He sees the tapestry of your life from an eternal view. And while you may only see one thread at a time, He is weaving every event into a masterpiece of destiny. And trusting His timing means surrendering the illusion of control, letting go of the deadlines you set for yourself, and allowing His divine wisdom to unfold your story at the perfect pace. Abraham waited decades for the promise of a son, and though years passed with no visible sign, the promise never expired, because what God speaks is eternal. It does not die in delay, it matures. And every year that Abraham waited was building faith, deepening trust, and preparing his heart for the fulfillment that would glorify God more than immediate results ever could. And the same is true for you. The waiting season is not a pause in your purpose, it is the proving ground of your faith, where God refines your patience, purifies your motives, and strengthens your spirit. Because before He gives you what you are praying for, He makes sure you are ready to sustain it. When you trust God's timing, you stop forcing outcomes. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop thinking that you are late, because you realize that divine plans are individually designed, And what happens for someone else in a moment may take you years, not because you are less favored, but because your assignment requires deeper roots, stronger preparation, and more refined faith. And while others are sprinting, God may have called you to walk, because He is not training you for a moment, He is preparing you for a lifetime of impact. And every step you take in obedience becomes part of a greater rhythm of grace that leads you toward the fulfillment of His promise. Sometimes faith means doing nothing but standing still, waiting quietly in trust when everything inside you wants to move, because the greatest demonstrations of faith are not always found in action, but in surrender. And when you stop striving and start trusting, you make room for God to act. You give space for His supernatural hand to move in ways your human effort never could. And in that surrender, peace flows like a river, because your heart finally aligns with heaven's pace, understanding that the one who holds tomorrow is already preparing it for your arrival. And all you need to do is remain faithful today. There will come a time when every unanswered prayer makes sense, when every delay will reveal its purpose, and when every tear will prove to have been a seed of faith that watered your destiny, because God's timing is never random, it is always redemptive. And if you can just hold on, keep believing, keep walking, and keep trusting, you will see that what you thought was a setback was actually set up, that what you thought was wasted time was sacred time, and that what you thought was silence was strategy. For the promises of God are yes and amen, but they manifest in the fullness of time. And when that time arrives, no force on earth or power of darkness can stop it, because what is appointed for you will always find you when your faith meets His perfect timing.